the journey for most everybody is understanding that you have that kind of transformative capacity when you are writing for people you will never, ever meet. It's an act of faith.
Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from the Story a Day podcast. I have a guest for you this week, Dr. Julie Helmrich, a psychologist who specialises in narrative, who's here to talk to us about why the story we tell ourselves is the most important story we'll ever tell. So if you have ever struggled with imposter syndrome, your inner editor, or the difficulty of keeping up with the habits you've promised you're going to do with your writing this year, you're going to love this interview. Welcome, Dr. Julie Helmrich, she's had over 35 years of working with individuals and organisations in the area of personal effectiveness. Her doctorate is in psychology, and she's taught at 10 universities in 4 states in psychology and leadership. For her efforts, she was recognised as one of Milwaukee's most creative people by Milwaukee Magazine in 2013. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. I'm really happy to be here.
The real reason I invited her here is because Julie's specialty is working through a particular lens of narrative and story structure, and throws around terms like hero's journey as if she's one of us. So I wanted to invite her in to chat about some of that stuff and talk about the ways that we can make ourselves do the work we want to do. So, Dr. Julie, why do you talk about story rather than, for example, changing your habits? And why is that so powerful?
The reason that I'm not a big fan of people paying attention to personality is it just doesn't account for very much of the changes, very much variability in anything. But even like introversion, extroversion, which is the most powerful predictor of behavior, doesn't account for very much behavior. So, there are 5 different sort of traits and types, and you could still know more. A person's narrative is much more predictive of what they will do. And your narrative, the way I use that word, that it means, what is the story you are telling to yourself about yourself? And I would argue that's the most important writing you've ever done. And that's a story that can be, could be, and I would say should be, for most of us, written and rewritten and rewritten. When I'm writing for other people, and that makes it really easy. I'm not writing for approval. I'm not trying to be perfect, and that's part of why it's easy to get up at 5 a.m.
We have to get the work done. It's something that we're all committed to. We feel it as an urge inside, and yet it's hard to make ourselves do the work sometimes. And I feel like a lot of that is to do with narrative.
It has to do with, that you believe who you're listening to is you, but you're probably not. You're probably, most everybody has an inner critic. Around here, we actually have a phrase for that I think it's really useful to actually use this phrase. The phrase we use is hitmaster, or harsh internal taskmaster. And most everybody has one. And your harsh internal taskmaster, its job is to remind you that you're not much, how dare you think that you are something, number 1. And number 2, how dare you act like you've done enough? So its job is basically to shame you for not being enough and guilt you for not doing enough. And if you have a really good hitmaster, it's going to be hard for you to produce anything that you show to other people. And then let's be clear, if your hitmaster was accurate, it's good advice, but it's not. And you did not choose this. It was installed in you by other people.
So where does it come from, and how do we kill it?
Yeah, well, or how do you, I always say get an acceptable level of peacefulness, because human beings, some of this is built into us, but when it gets big, somebody has helped accelerate that in you, and it's the usual suspects, right? It's parents, teachers, coaches, the majority culture narrative, whatever cultural narrative that you live in. You have to just walk down the street and look at the billboards, look at the advertisers. So there's a lot of subtle things out there that get into the story that you tell yourself about yourself. A phrase that I use is that as soon as you understand the power of internal narrative, you're never going to get casual about what you hear yourself thinking. You will never go, it's no big deal that I had that thought. It's a big deal that you had that thought. The question is, where did it come from? Super important. Like, where did that come from? Maybe it's your own thought. You can consider that possibility, but you should consider that it could be somebody else's thought and they might be trying to make some money off you. A lot of it is marketer speak, in my opinion. And so we have a lot of that living inside us. And here's a really big one. Most of us got this, I think, from parents and teachers, which is, you have a dream to be a writer or something, to write a book, to have everybody to be on Oprah's show on Sunday morning. Does she still do that? I don't know. Talking about your book. And then that's going to be great. You're going to change lives. Or you're just going to be super popular. You have some money, extra money in the bank, all of that stuff. And then there's a little built in subtly or really specifically. And that is how you get happiness in this life. You will be happy if you do these things.
I think that's one of the things, the work, the practice, that is the thing that makes it worthwhile. But still, it's easy to get derailed by the voices.
I can tell you that I could be completely wrong about your particular group of people, Julie, but I will tell you my standard belief is the trying to balance in your own personal narrative this idea of I'm unique with there are 7 billion of us who are also unique. And then your uniqueness is needed in the world. The odds of you being born are not very high. You're likely to win the lottery 3 times or something like that than to be born. And so if you just think about that, like, it's very unusual that you're here. And most people don't believe that. I mean, they say they do, but they don't, because you can test this in yourself that, like, I'll just use you, Julie, as an example. You have 2 kids. I mean, Julie, if your kids' lives depended on you getting up at 5 a.m. and writing for 2 hours, you'd do it, period. Boom, over, done with, no debate, right? Because you're that important to them. The journey for most everybody, my opinion, is understanding that you have significance at a very similar kind of level to people you will never, ever meet. That you have that kind of transformative capacity when you are writing for people you will never, ever meet, and they will not tell you either. And so this is an act of faith, just knowing that and believing it. It's an act of faith.
I think that's one of the things, like when you're writing and when you don't have a publishing contract and you're doing the practice of it. Yeah, it's very easy to sit down at your desk and like do other stuff. And the question that I know resonates with you is when you stand at your desk and you say, what difference does it make if I write today, right?
And I cannot hear that I cannot, again, I could have once upon a time, but not anymore. I can't hear the what difference does it make now without it automatically translates into my head that the person has said, what difference do I make? I take the it out and I put it's automatically, and I goes, what difference do I make? Well, there's your question. What difference do you make?
And on a bad day,
you,
how do we tell ourselves that like, you know, that
well,
maybe we do?
Well, and I have an answer that's not a popular answer, but it's a powerful answer, Julie, so I'll give it to you. Sitting around thinking you don't make a difference is one of the more arrogant beliefs, I think. I know people who are like, what? I'm not arrogant. How do you know what difference you make or don't make to somebody you've never met? If you can't know, just do the work and put it somewhere. Just do the work, put it somewhere.
On that note, you are a change fluency expert. You help people to actually go from wanting to make a change to making a change. You've worked with a lot of people who've changed their habits and changed their lives. What actually works? Narrative.
Seriously, y'all, writers for the win. So now it's what kind of writing? What kind of writing to work on your own internal narrative? And for sure, you have to write in such a way that your hitmaster gets neutralized. Your narrative has to be about yourself. You have to really neutralize and counteract every teacher, every parent, every sibling. A lot of this is sibling stuff, I think. Every sibling comment, you have to neutralize those ones that basically went like, who do you think you are? Well, you got put on the planet. I don't know who you actually are, but like, forget about who do you think you are and just go producing something from your heart, from your soul, from your toes, whatever. The farther from your brain, the better. Because the hitmaster kind of lives in the brain. We go through an 8-step process here. So it's like, what's your purpose? And I always tell people, like, seriously, do not get hung up on that. It's to love and contribute. It's being and doing. That's it. And then there's, in particular ways, my particular way of contributing has a lot to do with psychology, because that's what I've developed out. Yours would have to do with other things. If I say that's what I'm about, if I say I'm a writer and I'm about writing and I'm not writing, then there's a gap, right? So in that gap, there are narratives, there are beliefs, there are justifications. We call them around here. It's your justification for the status quo. This is the truth of what's going on in my life, and here's how I justify it. Around here, we call that old story. So your old story are your current set of beliefs, your current set of just your narrative. We just call it old story, internal. You can go looking for how you got it, but I'm like, whatever. It's just going to be indoctrinated by whoever you grew up around and whatever culture you're living in, and it's just there. So, like, who cares where it came from? But to get out of that, you have to do something that's pretty confrontive, which is to say, you look in the mirror, you write. It's best if you write it out the way it's exactly occurring in your head. Why would I keep writing this? Nobody's going to read it anyway. I don't know, whatever the narrative is that's keeping you from like doing your work. You just write it all out. And that's step 4, by the way. And the 5th step is the one that's actually critical. And if you don't do this, you won't change any of them, which is that you have to experience the impact of that old story, which is why you have to write it. And sometimes you want to read it out loud. And if you get it correct, you're going to find it repulsive. It's going to make you kind of want to throw up. It's going to look so bad and ugly that that it's automatically motivating to like, okay, this can't stand. Okay, no, this has got to change. And then you start writing what's called a new story. And a new story is a story that is filled with facts, Like, I don't know if anybody's going to read this or not because I've never given it to anybody to read. So I don't know if anybody will read it. I don't know if this is valuable to anybody or else. It's not my job to determine value for other people. I write it and they have to decide if it's valuable to them. That's not my job. Why am I using that as my little hide behind thing? So a news story always starts with the truth is. The truth is. Like, I don't know, Julie, if you're helping somebody write a book, how many times do you hear, I don't have time?
It's usually the first excuse that people have.
Exactly. And the truth is you have time. The truth is you have 168. The truth is I have 168 hours every week. I've always had 168 hours every week. I will always have 168 hours every week I'm alive. I have enough time. The circles that I run in, they might not be doing fiction, but they all say they write in 90 minutes a day. So the truth is I waste 90 minutes a day on something less important than my writing. That's the truth for most writers, isn't it? I mean, it's truth for most of us. So that we say around here, a good story, meaning a story that will take you, that's a good one for you to have, a good internal narrative, is on purpose, means it helps you love and contribute. It's truthful, meaning you're not lying in there. Around here we call it truthiness. Let's get the truthiness out of the old story. And it inspires hope-filled action. So purpose, truth, action. And the action then turns into the habits, Julie, that you're talking. Practically none of that habit stuff, that practice stuff works because it needs to be built atop the narrative, a new narrative. And and you can feel this in yourself and other people. I mean, everybody that you know who's had a transformation in their life, they had a narrative change. They had an internal narrative change that precedes the external thing. People can keep external things going on for a while, usually about 6 weeks, sometimes up to 12. If you want something enduring, then your internal narrative has to change. It's foundational. And in your characters, by the way, if you want to convince the reader that this is a permanent change, you're going to have to show how the internal narrative shifted and why. And it has to be something like that step 5, that experience, the old story.
So this is the moment in the story where they look in the mirror and go, who have I become?
Exactly.
And they don't like it.
Exactly. And they want to throw up. They hate themselves. Yeah. They've betrayed themselves. They've betrayed everything important in them. They've betrayed people. And the reason that resonates with anybody reading it is everybody's done it. They might have done it for 10 minutes or they might have done it for 10 years, but human beings know what that feels like. It sucks. And that's the part where they start liking the character, even the bad guy. Mm-hmm. I love it when somebody is written and they're bad and you still like them. And I go like, when I see that, I go like, well done, writers, because you wrote that person in such a way that I know they're doing all the wrong things and I'm still rooting for them, which means that somehow I'm inside them and I get it why they're doing the wrong stuff. And I still kind of want them to get away with it.
So there you have the first part of my interview with Dr. Julie Helmrich. And if that didn't give you some food for thought, I would be very surprised. Next time, when I have her back on the podcast, she's going to talk to us about some brand new research that's being done in the field of psychology that's blowing the field apart. And because it more accurately than anything else before predicts how a person will behave. It's cutting edge stuff, and just imagine how useful that kind of information is going to be for us as writers. So I'll be back with that soon. And in the meantime, if you're going to get some writing done, there's a brand new writing prompt over at the blog storyaday.org/wow. -custom, and it's all about weird little customs and how we can use those to create realistic settings, or as it's known in the sci-fi and fantasy world, world building. But it needs to be done in every story. So go over to the blog, check that out. If you have any questions, as always, you can email them to podcast@storyaday.org, and I'll see you back here next time. If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the Story a Day 3-day challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days. And it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-day challenge at storyaday.org/3DC. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week, and of course, keep writing.